as someone who's like been in music and tech for a long time, I think it's really common. I hear the term like direct to fan, and I definitely love platforms that do that. But oftentimes when these conversations come up, they're not actually talking about how to build a fan base, you know. And there's a lot of artists who are great, talented, it's their hobby, but they might have like 50 really real fans. Like they've never headlined a show. They really do direct support in the cities they live in. But there's someone saying their platform is the best one for them. So I saw a tweet that kind of touched on that. And I'm curious what you all think. I mean, is it something that I'm just tired of hearing all the time? Do you hear it all the time? How do you all feel?
No, I hear that shit way too much, and I hate it. I mean, it's 15 years of the music industry and the major players playing bullshit games of market share and other things that have nothing to do with direct-to-fan or fandom or super fandom or whatever the shit they come up with. Like, I don't... For me, I'm really frustrated with this. I'm really frustrated with how to say this. I don't even know what to divulge. We'll get into it, but like, I think divulge. Yeah.
Do you got to sign something? You know, I'll sign something. You know.
Simple as you can say it and we'll beep it out. That's the whole point of the timestamp. Oh, we could beep it out, right?
Yeah.
It's 2020.
I'm reconfirming. Shit.
That's a microphone.
To Melody's point. Yeah. The frustration is like also working on the tech side. You see all these startups, you see all these companies, and they're trying to work it out. And then the majority of the industry says no for years, right? Like, I mean, take back to you. Like, how many years of trying to do direct to fan or hearing about it, no one had any fucking interest in it because everything was streaming, right? And then people tried to redo the whole thing, and there's market share and niche artists and labels and management companies and all this. And then my story that I would contribute to this whole conversation is like trying to redo streaming models. And that tested, there's 4 major companies. Merlin, I consider the 4th, right? The conglomerate of indies. I only needed 2 out of the 4 majors at SoundCloud to change something when it came to streaming model. I knew I was going to piss off 2 other ones out of the 4. One of the 2 that were not included in the actual strategy for a long-term game that was from the forefront, but we engaged all of them unilaterally to be like respectful. But one of them, which you know who it is, anyone who's like studied press and to your points, went really out of their way to talk about Superfans when they realized they lost control. Because when you're losing control to a trend, let alone a theme, let alone a construct that others are building against, right? Then all of a sudden there's paranoia. Then there's like, what am I doing? What are my teams doing? Who has the upper hand? And I think that was when, was it like 2 years ago or something? Like Superfans came up in like media and press, and to what you were just saying, it was just frustrating for me, like talking about unearthing streaming data. If you pay differently, then the data means something different. And then you could source things that actually people's behavior is fan-like. But they said, no, we don't want to have to fucking do anything with this, but we're going to take the theme of super fandom and then try to make it something else. But then it became a bastard version of like the direct consumer thing. Like it was just trying to own the narrative without having a solution for it.
The thing is, I want to hear what you all think, but like, I'm really pro the whole data thing, right?
Yeah.
I think
Pro the what thing?
pro data. Like, let's say, who goes to Empanada Mama at 3:00 on a Saturday night, right? Give me the data on those people. And then what shows do they go to? I'd rather have that type of data than the super fan of an artist that plays my favorite DIY spot. Because, hey, if you know these are people who go out hella late on Saturdays and they go out all the time, maybe you should target these people for a cool underground show. Because these people just want to be out. They don't know where to go. They're like, well, let's go to Empanada Mama's always open. you can target those people. Okay, do a good show. I mean, you do events, like you get what it's like, but just trying to like say direct to fan as someone that has 80 super fans, I'm not really buying
What's the
that.
definition
I'm not
of it,
buying
right?
that. Like, what do they wear? Where do they hang out? Like all that type of stuff. That's what I actually care about.
Yeah, like marketing, like actually marketing. Yeah, I think on my end it's frustrating because I'm getting emails from every platform that's kind of raised money on this whole like direct to fan shit, which for me I feel like it's only because of the Music in the Air report. Like I think when that report came out, VCs decided to invest in it. I feel like every tech bro in the fucking world was like, okay, cool, Goldman Sachs said it, so now we can go raise money against it. And then they just spam every manager like Sabrina and myself and a bunch of my friends. And one thing we always talk about is like, and that's the part I loved about the tweet was, everybody wants to die on the direct to fan hill, but not talk about the I need fans mountain. And it's like, that's literally it.
Yes.
It's like you got kids with 100,000 monthly listeners, 1 million monthly listeners, and they cannot do a tour by themselves. And then you have kids with like 400,000 monthly listeners, 200,000 monthly listeners, and they still have like a real core fan base because they built it in Discord. They did all this other shit. So for me, I think it's a Ponzi scheme. I feel like Even might be the only platform that like, and I keep talking about Even, but I feel like Even is one of the only platforms that is committed to that. I think even them partnering with Russell kind of spoke to that and just like really going in and thinking about like the business of music and trying to translate that to artists instead of just trying to kind of like broadcast to other VCs. Does that make sense?
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I think that inherently is the root of the problem is like the nature of the business of it all, and nobody's teaching artists the business side, right? So it's like that is the root, has been the root of the issue like for all of time. Like I remember I went a year ago to like an event in LA with my friend who's an A&R at United Masters, and he signed Big X the Plug, so he's hot. And every artist, it was an event for developing artists to like come meet other producers, like network, whatever. And every artist is running up to him to like, can I get your email? How do I get signed? What do I need to do for you to sign me? And finally, I'm like standing there and I'm like, if you don't have fans, you're wasting your time. And I think that's like, a lot of artists don't realize that because it's like, I think for all of eternity, it was like the A&Rs hold the keys, right, to like changing your life. But it's like, no, you can change your life. You can build your business. And I think it goes back to what we were speaking about a bunch last time and just a bunch of times internally, is just like nobody is teaching artists how to do business, or artists need to care more about how they should be building their own business instead of hoping that somebody, whether it's an app or any of these things, is going to come in and make it easier for them.
It's almost like there's suckers to catchphrases.
Artists.
Everybody. And I think Melanie, what you were talking about, which is the empanada example, I actually love that because it's human behavior.
Yeah.
Right? It's like late night, this is where it's showing up. To your point, what you're saying too is like there's a middle ground of where people actually live. Not where you look at, Goldman Sachs and doing Music in the Air and that shit. And like a year ago, I spoke to Lisa Yang, who runs that report at Goldman Sachs, and I was quite honestly insulted that like the year before that they started covering like all the streaming stuff, and there's only a few players in the market that like change things. But at the same time, it was like you can't write about it if you didn't talk to the people that know the behaviors, live the life of being an artist manager, right? With you both, right? Or have pushed the boundaries or fought streaming and rights holders and the whole dynamic. So it's like, how can you trust, or how can artists trust these narratives
Yeah.
and all this stuff that like it's inhuman?
Yeah. I mean,
Like we're talking about music.
yeah, I think the general consensus, which is a conversation for all the time, whether it's, I think when it comes to entertainers, like I'm talking about athletes, I'm talking about musicians, artists, is like there's this clear difference between the business side and the artist side, and these artists that are so heavily dependent on other people. And because of that, they don't understand what they might or might not be missing out on, right? It's like what we spoke about with like Playboi Carti selling his music on Shopify.
Oh, yeah.
It's something my artist is doing as well, right? Because it's like he can now grow his pixel from everyone that's coming in. He can see who's coming in, retarget, contact them. So it's like that's how you're truly starting to build brick by brick that business, instead of just hoping to strike gold and somebody else then has all your data and information like we're talking about, and they'll run your business for you. But at the end of the day, you won't really know what's going on to even make some of those decisions that you need to make.
Yeah. And also, I think it's like, the example you gave about people running up to the managers, like, or the A&R. I think people forget that Ice Spice didn't come from like nowhere. Like Doechii didn't come from, like, there's people that months, years before were covering these people. Like Doechii was a YouTuber, like Doechii, like someone like Ice Spice, like she had one hit, and then when people went back into her catalog, like who directed that video? Who else did that director direct for? Like you look at the way people jump and skip around. Someone who once worked at Colorist now works at Spotify. One of my favorite people who was like a DIY blogger now is at like a DSP. That manager now goes to this like major label, and we all know each other. That person who's the manager of the hot artist, they used to manage a studio. Like, no one even looked at them back in the day. And they're all sending each other, what's the app, like Untitled, like all sending files, check this out. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, the song came out next week. It's been in the ether. Now, yeah, the average person sending on Twitter or whatever probably didn't know, but that is what is a business. And I'm a big advocate of like, you're in the business when you start working with artists.
Yeah.
You're in the business when you start contributing. But I think a lot of times people's priorities are just themselves and their own career.
Yeah.
Therefore, they're like, oh, that person's an industry plant. No. If you were doing DIY shows, if you were helping someone be a stylist, you might have known that person. Like there's people I've met that were part of someone's entourage, and now they have a hot song. And I think that's part of the business too.
No.
Like, yes, targeting all that, the fact of like, how is this music getting shared? How do you become a player? What is people's history, whether you're a professional or you're the stylist?
So is that relationships? Like, is that like, how would you simplify everything?
It's like, it's tastes, it's relationships.
Yeah.
It's community building.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of all of it.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like in the tech community, people aren't talking more about like hyper targeting versus direct to fan? Like, why is like customer conversion or listener conversion not the conversation more than like direct to fan or AI?
I mean, I'll say from my perspective, and I definitely know you've been in more rooms discussing it than me, but I think it's the idea, a lot of things in tech is like, you can solve it. Like if you watch the YouTube video, you read the book, you take the course, you can figure out how to do this. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Music doesn't work that way. It's not a perfect science. I can go to, Penn Station and find someone that's way more talented than a person who has a song that's going to enter the Billboard chart next week. Doesn't mean that person's not talented, but all these different factors are in play. And I think in tech, they're not also often aware of what those factors are. So they kind of make up a solution. And if you get some VCs, you get your friends to all say, well, this is the solution. And you're in your little echo chamber, it's the solution. And then everyone else who, the rest of us who are actually in the mix, we're like, that is not the solution. Like, well, we raised $10 million, said it's the solution. That's great, but it's not the solution. Give us some examples, some artists that it worked with, and not people who are already famous. Don't say Web3 platform with Kings of Leon. They're already famous. Name someone that used your platform that none of us heard about 6 months ago, and you actually helped them build a career. But that's my point of view of it.
I think, I was just going to say, I think that's why, shameless plug, but I think that's why Rollout is so fire, because.
Oh, that's crazy.
No, because Donnie's always saying like the people that are on our team, he's putting them there because they have taste. And I think
I was just going to say the same thing.
That's what makes Rollout different. And that's what I think is going to make it such a great product, is because it's being developed and run by people that understand, or at least try to understand culture, or have taste and be involved in like what's happening, instead of just like shoving a product down everyone's throat, instead of just focusing on like what we have to reach and what we have to sell and scale. And
yeah,
it's interesting though, because like, to what you're all saying is music usually has two forms. It's either culture and counterculture. Counterculture becomes culture eventually. and then tech,
Right.
right? And like, even in tech, you have that where it's like, there's a movement of counterculture that people kind of get behind and they feel it and they're just like, okay. But there's, especially in music tech, you can feel it when people go, hold on, but do you have the pulse? Do you fucking understand who you're building for? Right? And then that's where it splits. And that's where you get the, what the fuck are we going to talk about? The Mikey Schulman bullshit. Like, but that's where there is that divergence of like, okay, you're embracing the culture, you're building for us and yourselves, and it goes that direction, and there's the other direction. We'll just call it the other direction. And then sometimes they cross paths, and all the work that you did in like Web3 and blockchain and all that, like it had that ethos, like it did, where it was, about self-sufficiency, the fuck you attitude, counterculture, that if it was embraced in the right way, it would become culture eventually, which it still can. Until we're talking about rollout, right? That also has the foundation for people to be able to say, you know what, I figured it out, how I can work with my team to figure out how to get this across the line.
Yeah.
It's so disgusting to talk about our app on our app's podcast. But no, but listen,
Let's talk about other one. We should talk about other ones.
I mean, I think my favorite example is like Splice. I think Splice is my favorite example of like a tech platform that is very much like in the culture. Like I think one of my favorite examples of it is like Fouché. She had a song, it came out, it was great, one of my favorite songs of the year. A year, some change later, drill rapper, takes some stuff she has on Splice and becomes a hit. And then becomes a hit, and it goes from going through, I guess, like, I think Empire to RCA and like that whole thing. But like, it's a tech platform that this all happened with. And like, I think I'm often most excited when tech is focusing on the producers. Because when I'm in a session or something and I'm noticing, a sample or this or that, it's the producer. They're like, oh, well, my producer picked that out. Often the artist doesn't know. So, yeah.
I would use the
not all the time.
But I would use the term to equate what you just said on music side and your question about tech is the architects. Like the architect in that instance is a producer.
Yeah.
And in your instance, you're asking about music tech, right? There's an architect that understands what they're building for. Even though there's an engineering, a whole slew of engineers, product managers, and all that, there has to be an architect that understands what the fuck am I building for.
Yeah.
And I think that, to your point too, is like the producers, right? Like there is something, and there's artists that are doing that, right? Like you were talking about your artist and how he thinks differently and he's thinking outside the box. That's the quality of an architect, being like, I need to build none of this blueprint bullshit.
Of course.
I understand my world, my life, and this is how I build my house.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to what you just said. Sorry, that like totally ignited this like architect frame of
Yeah.
I feel that way about Patreon too.
Yeah.
I think Patreon is probably one of my favorite. The founder was an artist. Like he was a musician.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a creative. And then he just decided like, oh, I can either keep being a creative or I can build another bucket for creators to start pouring water into and for the market to start pouring water into.
Yeah.
When I see stuff like that, and then I see the direct-to-fan conversation, when I think about Bandcamp, when I think about all the platforms that have existed, and then in the last 2 years, I've seen probably 15 platforms launch that are all, or the ones that did launch 5 years ago are now pivoting to direct-to-fan. It's kind of like gross to me because I look at like a Patreon, I look at Bandcamp, I look at these platforms that have existed, and it's like, those still haven't been adopted yet. So how, like you said, how do you actually get market adoption if you just keep using Kings of Leon and Beyonce or whoever else you want to name as the example and pay a bunch of money to buy culture, which I know you already said you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. But
what does culture really mean?
But Bandcamp, my favorite thing about Bandcamp is, I don't know if anyone else on tape is a big Bandcamp, but I love their Booyakashka emails. So anytime.
Their what emails?
Booyakashka. See. Okay, we know who has taste. We know who has taste at the table. We know who has taste at the table. So anytime you're on Bandcamp and stranger, friend, anyone that you know buys something that you have liked in the past, it shows that connection. It shows that someone bought something. So certain people with taste, we get those emails all the time.
That's fine.
And it's like the best. And like I like it because it's someone who comes like from working in Web3. Someone in Web3 would be like, okay, so you get a percentage of the sales?
Mm.
No. That vinyl was still $35 and the artist still got $35. My satisfaction is knowing that a friend or a stranger took the time to look through what I bought because they like my taste and they bought something.
Yeah.
To me, that's what culture is, because that is definitely, there are strangers that I call like my music twins that I will never meet in life, that I look at music that I have and then I'll see what things they have in common. And I'm like, oh my God, that's my music twin. They also like that person's first single before they signed their major label deal.
Yeah.
That song that came out in 2019.
Yeah.
You get me. Like, that's the stuff that gets me going. And like, I haven't seen too many platforms like that. I use this platform called Factory that has this new thing that kind of shows like a percentage that's kind of similar. And it's kind of supposed to be like the Letterbox or Goodreads for music. But anything that kind of shows compatibility or gives the user props, because that's my whole thing. Like, my MO is like always about the tastemakers, the culture people. That's my driver, right? And showing those, making those people feel seen. Because I think there's always going to be a lot of tools that are going to amplify musicians as they should be. But I love that Bandcamp shows you a profile. Like, I know SoundCloud and like, you know, Spotify and other things, like your playlists and your likes are kind of hidden. I like it's front and center on Bandcamp, and I love that connection they can give to other people. So I just got to mention that since Bandcamp came up.
No, 100%. To segue, since we're talking about tech, the Mikey Shulman 20VC podcast interview, the part that went viral. This is him saying that people...
Take a sip.
Mikey Shulman, the CEO of Suno AI, said that he doesn't believe that people, if you want to build a platform for 1 billion people, then you have to, or if you want to make music more accessible for 1 billion people, you got to build a platform for 1 billion people. And he doesn't believe that most people who make music enjoy the process of making music.
It's not really enjoyable to make music now. People enjoy
Why'd you say
Suno.
that?
It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice. You need to get really good at an instrument or really good at a piece of production software. I think the majority of people don't enjoy the majority of the time they spend making music.
It's so difficult to train and learn how to play an instrument or use a production software and get good at it that most people quit. But if you make it easier, you have less people quitting. So to go around the room or to just throw on the table, how do we feel about Mikey Shulman, CEO of a music AI company, saying some shit?
Disgrace to every single mic in the world.
Oh, man.
It's a mic to mic. Buddy.
Disgrace. So many thoughts, but
I mean,
yeah. Go.
I'll jump in before
Yeah, please.
you guys. No, because I think this is a larger philosophical topic, not just like what he said specifically in that disgrace. But to go to what you were saying about Bandcamp and why you love, right? Because that's discovery. It's another form of discovery. And I think what AI is doing, well, I don't think anyone really does discovery anymore. Like, and I know we'll get perhaps
Platforms, you mean, or just
I don't
in general?
think people sit, and I'll say this for myself. I used to sit for hours on SoundCloud, right? Like, go to one person and then fans also liked or similar songs, and then you just end up in a rabbit hole and you end up like closing the computer with like 50 new songs that you're like can't wait to tell all your friends. And I think like that's so beautiful that you love that, because it's another form of discovery. And like, because of TikTok, which I know we've spoken about before and we'll touch on the ban, but I think discovery is no longer. It's more so like, I'm going to doom scroll until something cool pops up on my screen. And I think to this conversation and what AI is doing as a whole, there's like two paths that you can take with AI. And one is like, oh my God, we're making life so much easier, because it's like another level of like laziness in a way. Like, all these tech companies are going to like feed off of the laziness of everyone else not wanting to do shit. Like musicians that don't want to make music or don't enjoy it, which is clearly coming from somebody who's doesn't have a creative bone in his body or perhaps doesn't enjoy things.
Yeah.
But the other path is like the smart man, the smart person takes this tool and uses it to help him advance.
Yes.
But that conversation is like, let's pry on your weakness so that you want to use our tool. And like, as a society overall, the smarter tool here, I'm providing you with a tool to enhance your business rather than the latter. But yeah, it's just like social media, all that stuff. I think everyone's just gotten so lazy, and it's like nobody can pay attention to something for longer than 3 seconds anymore. So it's like, how can we continue to like brain rot? But that's all I have to say on that.
And like, and then once again, that goes back to the marketing thing, right? Like if he wasn't saying it and you had a story of like someone, because of a physical reason, they can't play like the trumpet or something, and they've always loved like jazz music, and you know, this something's really, really technical, and you make a clip of this person who physically can't do it, and they made it easy. And instead of it taking, you know, hours to play these couple notes, you made it seem easy.
Yeah.
You know, it was like a Volvo ad. You know what I mean? Like, okay, maybe we'll be for it. Because like the story of this person who loves jazz, they can just like be in their apartment with their cat playing this music and fulfilling their dream, you know, with their vinyls next to them. But no, it's a founder saying it, right?
Yeah.
And I think like when you were talking, maybe think about that. He's like, it's a treadmill and running outside. We live in New York right now. It's snow outside. That's why you have treadmills. So you can keep on running even when it's snowing outside. Create that type of comparison. Don't say people don't want to go through the process. The process is beautiful.
It's everything.
That's
Absolutely.
that's your story. That's how you get to know yourself.
You're poetic, but
It's absolutely fucking everything. The four of us are gonna be fucking dead. All we have is the process.
Yeah.
Mikey Showman, you're gonna be fucking dead. All you have is the process. Like it is absolutely what you just said. Like it is, I can't imagine doing anything without reflecting on process and feeling growth. If I press a fucking button, what the fuck is the difference between that and ordering Domino's? I can't. But at the same time, there is, to what you both just said, is the ability to overcome obstacles, not instant gratification.
Yeah.
I think what you both described is beautiful. Like I'm heavily involved in the voice AI space, and Randy Travis had a stroke, you know, huge career, and recorded a new record, wrote the whole record. He can't sing after a stroke, but he recorded it, had someone else sing it, perform it. It's in his voice, and he has a great, fantastic record.
Yeah.
To your point, that there is
That's cool.
that is like, there is function, there is utility, and there's beauty there if people stress the need. But like, you can't just say, you know, I see the Mikey Schulman thing and the glorified need of what they're all building is like Hallmark. It's like let people create Hallmark cards and audio and music and all this stuff to tell, you know, like we if we click the button, said there's four of us here, we're doing a podcast, write us a song, and we give it a theme, and we have a intro song, fine, whatever. But we shouldn't put it on streaming platforms and other ways that other people make money to take money away from other people.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I wanted to call out from this whole thing.
Yeah.
Like it's one thing to let people create that never would have, because they never had the patience or the gall or the drive or the passion to do it. But then to take money away from other people that do, fuck you.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's I hate hearing the statement, and it may be like somewhat of a hot take, but it's like, and I said this when Rob posted it. I saw Rob post it on Twitter. That's how I even saw it. But it's like, man, like I constantly think about like, what are the incentives of a society? Like in any time, the 1800s, 1400s, whatever you want to look at it. And it's like, man, we're incentivized to do things that are easier and more convenient. And we're headed as a more convenience. We're headed into like, you can order Uber when you want. You don't got to learn how to like call a cab anymore. You can, like, porn addiction is high because you can just like simulate the idea of sex at any time that you want. So you don't have to have social skills.
Yeah, I'm sure
as a young
a
man.
lot of that, yeah.
Everything, you know what I mean? Like you can take photos on your phone, so you don't necessarily have to become like a craftsman photographer anymore. Like you can use filters on Instagram and do the whole thing. So as much as I hated hearing it, all I could think was like, man, this is the future. Well, we haven't rewarded. We haven't rewarded. And I say this all the time. Like in the future, authenticity will be the luxury because artificial is the norm. Craft will be the luxury because convenience is the norm, right? So like everything I heard him say, it's like, damn, you know what? It probably is gonna be 100,000 kids who become like platinum selling artists because they just like typed prompts into this platform and use these tools.
I mean, we have tight beats. We do have tight beats.
For sure. But imagine if you could just make a type beat, like you can make 25 beats in a day just off of a couple of prompts. It's like, that's the future.
But this is the future of those prompts is the action of a producer, right? Like the producer is a human being, as an individual, can disseminate what the artistry, people, songwriters, whoever the group is or themselves, they understand the vision and they can translate the vision into something. But the tools they use today is, depending on the genre of music, whatever, the multitude of things they use, right? So prompting, and it's not anything new. People say, like, you know, the future of prompting is producership. Like people, I get it.
We're going to get into this, yeah.
Yeah, but there's something really curious about it, because I'm trying to think of it from a producer standpoint. I'm like, I get it. I almost want to challenge the thing. I want to break these models. I want to break them and say, I'm going to challenge you with, I know what I have in my head. Unlike the Schulman statement, I have enough experience to actually do this and articulate it in a way with myself and other songwriters and producers that I know, to build the thing that's in my head and to communicate it to others. But I'm going to challenge myself to type it and to articulate it as well as I can for this machine to tell me and give me an output. And I have to admit, I've done it a few times with other people, producers and everybody, to be like, you know what? It gave me enough leeway for me to be able to show you what I was trying to say and trying to do in a short period of time. But this sucks. But it gave us direction.
Yeah.
It gave us direction that, like, you're like, oh yeah, I kind of get where you're going. Like, we kind of have to go this way. We got to go left. But this is pretty bad. But I get it. But to what you were saying, really quickly, and I mean very quickly, that will change. Like, the more articulate the producers, songwriters, artists get, and the more advanced this technology gets, which is insanely accelerated, that's the terrifying part. And also curious, that's probably where you're about to go with it. Like people being able to say, you know what, maybe someone will like unlock it. Like, I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah. And I think let's go back to drill for some reason, right? You know, from Chicago.
Now let's go back to that. Is like some.
Because I
That's the most gangster shit. We talking about AI.
No, but like to me, like drill, like touch everything is like international. This is that, but it's like, you know, I remember during the pandemic, like having like this clubhouse room, and like this like really enthusiastic kid from Poland popped in. He was like really into drill music, and he's like, "Oh, can I show you some Polish drill?" That producer is probably from London. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the producer's probably not from Poland, or if not, they definitely still, studied. Freudian slip. They definitely like studied people from London.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm really into drill from like Ghana and Nigeria and stuff like that, but they know what the source is.
Yeah.
And the thing is, prompt engineering, I find it super interesting because two people can sit side by side and the results are going to be different based off of like the insights they have, what culture, what environments they're in. So I don't think the tool itself is bad. I think it's just making sure that, how do I put it? I think so many things in life is like the people who are the most well-versed on culture or the most quote talented, can they still be considered the cream of the crop? If there's no way for them to be the cream of the crop, that's when I worry. Like I said before, there's someone who's singing at Penn Station. If I walked up to them and say, hey, this is my friend's information, they're an A&R, or hey, go to this audition tomorrow, they probably can blow everyone out the water. No one walked up to them. The tools still exist for them. If you have the tools and the person that knows like this like new inventive type of production sound, or can actually play 5 instruments and then but they can't play piano, and they can all come together, if that person can still win, I love it. But if we're setting up a future where these talented people can't win, that's when I have issues. And that's my recurring, all different types of types of tech and things like that.
Yeah.
I think this goes back to like the very first conversation though, is like Superfans, fans, right? Like you could have somebody make some shit at home and it end up on the Billboard charts off of an AI tool, but it's like, are they gonna tour? Are they gonna have that super fan base? Like, are they gonna be talking to these people on Discord, right? Because that's
Feeling that.
no, it's real. Because that is it. Like, that is the model, right? Like, that is how you build longevity in this career, and then you take it a step further and you start signing producers and art. Like, you could have, like, I'm sure there are gonna be bunches of kids using these tools and ending up on Billboard charts and going viral. Like, we already seen a bunch of it. But it's like, where does your career, how are you building a long career from that, right? It's like, I know 2 artists, right? One has 4 million monthly listeners, one has 3.3 monthly listeners. So they're basically in the same place, but one just sold out a European tour and one is opening up for somebody because he can only sell 60 tickets.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, they're making relatively the same income off of streaming, but one is making 10 times more money off of touring and merch and every other thing that he's probably doing versus this artist. So it's like, you'll make some nice income off of streaming for sure, but you can never replace the human experience, which I think is like, it's so interesting that everyone's trying to replace that. Like, Elon Musk is rushing to build robots and
That's a whole yeah.
whole other conversation. But it's just
That's
like,
not enough fucking wine. But go on.
yeah, it's just like, you can't replace seeing Chapel Roan and seeing a crowd of people. You know what I'm saying? Like, that whole experience. No, not from.
I think in 50 years, man, I think this shit, like I said, I hated hearing him say it because it sounded so gross of being like, Mikey, like everything Mikey said was just like, oh, like craft. He basically was like, craft is like people don't want craft. They just want to do it easy. Right. But it's like, I realized that, like, I watched that Beyonce performance on Netflix. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
that's some shit that we just have not seen before.
But there's layers to it, right?
Yeah.
Like I believe that it was there was a show that I was supposed to go to last night, and I was like, I don't feel like it. And I was like, man, I wish it was like 2020 when I could have just like, there was going to be a live stream, but the producer would have had a live stream version of it. I kind of missed that. But at the same time, when I went to Renaissance, it was like this, Australian woman next to me who came by herself, who was in her 40s, who was just like crying a little bit. And she was like, oh my God, Beyonce's so beautiful. She's so, like,
Yeah.
if I'm watching it from home from my phone or a laptop, it's not the same as looking every 20 minutes like this, lady who came from who knows where. And she's like, this is the best moment of her life. Seeing these 2 women and like a few rows ahead of me who keeps on getting ushered back by security because they keep on cutting the line, like,
it's the human.
right. The
experience.
outfits, someone voguing in the corner.
I think the kid in like 1890 who can tell a story about riding on a horse and buggy sounds compelling to the kid in 1968 who just bought a GTO.
But we're talking about music.
I mean, we're talking about transportation and we're talking about community and family. There's people who felt like riding in the car or riding on a horse and buggy was a beautiful thing because of a horse.
I will take your time jump, and I will go to 1932.
Okay.
Charlie Chaplin directing, writing, producing, and writing all the music for the movie The Kid.
Okay. Yeah.
And I haven't watched that I'm too old to tell everybody, but like, I was at
1953.
Oh, come on.
and I was at my mother's, and I had my kids with me, and she was like, "Oh, did you tell the kids about Charlie Chaplin and all this stuff?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't." And oh shit, the cops are coming after me first.
Did you tell your mother that?
Yeah, I was with my mother, and then all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, I had like HBO Max or whatever it's called, like queued on the TV." And I was like, "Oh, look, it's here." And I showed the kids it. One kid's 10, one kid's 5. And it's eternal. Like, the way he wrote it, narrated it, segmented, the arrangement, like everything, the story arcs, like they're eternal. And my 10-year-old just totally gravitated to it. He loved it. He's a little different than most kids. I don't know. I think so, but like,
Such as that.
yeah.
He's different than what other kids.
I mean, fuck. He watched the Japanese version of Godzilla. When I give him the modern version, he's like, "No, I'll take the black and white."
Okay.
Yeah. So and that was when he was 5. So that was his test. That was his test.
Gene pool, yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is that when there is a master craft, you can't deny what you're all saying is when there's a mastercraft of something that skews and bounces like innovation, but like universality. You know what I mean? Like the Beyonce and that lady that was close to you. Like there's something beautiful about that. And I don't think that could ever die out, but I think there'll be less of it. I think to your thing that you're just talking about now,
Yeah.
more of that will die. It won't die out.
Did your
but
son
it'll die.
care that you watched it on Max?
No, he has. That's the thing that brings him Tom and Jerry, other things, and whatever.
And what I'm trying to say is that there's a million people right now ready to protest because of that platform. And when I watch him talk, Mikey talk, as much as it makes me cringe what he's talking about,
yeah,
yes, it'll be great to watch Charlie Chaplin on Max at home,
yes,
not in the theater in 1930.
That's what I was thinking when you said that. Because I remember with certain films, I had to literally go to indie film festivals to see one film. And I'm not talking about Sundance. I mean like New Orleans Film Festival, you know what I mean? Because it wasn't available on Netflix or blah, blah. That was my only opportunity ever to see it. And once again, I would show up. I remember it was the same director who did Afropunk, the documentary. And, you know, all the little alt black kids in New Orleans pulled up and I'm like, hi, nice to meet you. And it was a little scene, right? But at the same time, I also have to realize that the drive that certain people have to go out their way, obviously I'm an extrovert. Everyone is not like that. And I do want to give space for those people who are not going to show up to that film festival, who's not going to go from, you know, Brooklyn to Jersey to go to see Beyonce by yourself if you're in your 40s. You know, I think we do have to give space for those people too.
Yeah. And that's what I think. I think in my mind, what's going to happen is that the future Mikey is talking about, like I started out as a photographer and a director. So I know what the DSLR meant. Like there was a war against kids who were using DSLR cameras by people who were using celluloid and 35 millimeter. Because they were like, this
Sir, this takes the craft away from it. That was the argument.
I remember the time the 35 millimeter kids, it was like, look at my fixed gear bike and my 35 millimeter.
Yes, with the little fucking bag and shit. They want the Urban Outfitters kid.
So there was an era where people shitted on us because they were like, that's not real filmmaking because you shot it on a T2I or a 7D or a 5D. But what happened and what Canon did, and they don't even maybe realize this, is they opened up the barrier to entry to like way more people. So as shitty as his statement sounds, I kept being like, oh shit, you know how many kids may want to be producers, but in their minds they're like, oh, I don't want to pull up Fruity Loops. And before Fruity Loops, it was, oh, I don't want to use an MPC. And before MPC, it was, I don't know how to play the guitar, the piano. It's like most producers that I know that started in Fruity Loops, that built a career off of it because they were talented, bought an MPC.
Well, that was,
and then they started learning how to play guitar.
Well, that was
started learning how to play
that
cymbals.
was also because you can actually get a pirated version of Fruity Loops back in the day, which I did that myself back in the day.
I'm saying, even if there's a free tier to Suno, it's like
well, that was like Ad Lab, and they're all doing that too. But I think what I just want to call out the thing that you're also talking about two different things is like you're talking about curation and you're talking about creation.
Yeah.
Those are very two different things. Like curation, the moment curation dies, it all dies because the thing that I see Schulman statement being a threat is that exponentially creation is just going to skyrocket while curation is actually depreciating.
Yeah.
So how the fuck is culture going to find its people?
Yeah.
And even though culture is based on its people, right? Like even what you were just saying, right? Like you and I are both extroverts. And where the hell do we find our people? Where do we hang out? What do we do? Like, it's really difficult to do that these days. And and then amongst the creation part of it, I can't follow.
Yeah.
I
will say though, it's like, I remember coming out of pandemic and like that first social gathering I went to and how good it felt. And again, I think like not to get too philosophical, but it's like we're talking about the human experience.
Yes.
Like if you're an introvert and you don't want to go to a Beyonce concert, don't go. You know what I mean? Like it's not for everybody, but you're going to remember that tiny film festival and tell your friends about this like tiny film festival, you met this random girl from Alabama that you would never have met. You have gone, you know what I mean? Like, that's the human experience. And I also think, like, to Donnie's example of the horse and buggy versus the car, technology moves so fast. We're talking about art. You know, like, there's a reason, like, the Louvre is constantly packed, right? Like, people fly from all over the world to go to the Louvre to see art that was made hundreds of years ago, to see a perspective that they can't see today. You know, like, I went to see Stevie Nicks with my mom last year, which at that concert, we sat next to a couple that had been driving across country following Stevie Nicks on her tour just to...
How long?
I think there was like 4 months of that.
Oh, I thought you meant like since they were 16.
No.
Okay.
I think everyone's assuming she's on like her last tour.
Yeah.
But just her standing up there and like she's telling stories of her life and like what inspired the music. And so it's like it's coming to life as you're watching because you're hearing her like talk about why she wrote Gypsy and how she was feeling. And it made the music so much more special because there was a human experience that was relatable, you know? So
I just want to say there's some artists that should never do that though.
perhaps, but I think she's also like, this is probably my last tour.
And that is like, that's eternal gold. Like that's just...
And that's what I'm saying. There's some things... And my other point that I wanted to add to is like, while these tools are now accessible to like the kids that dream of being producers, if you don't have that creativity or like you still have to feed the machine something. You know what I mean? Like I've been using this like AI editor tool to like add VFX to video. But if I don't tell the machine, like if I don't see a video and be like, what would be really fire here is like blood coming out of his head and then it'll transition into the scene with water flowing. Like if I don't have that idea and have that vision, it's still not going to work for me. So I think like there is this element again of like you still have to have the creative idea. Like a producer has to hear a melody in his head to be able to convey it to the machine to then get it. So I don't think it can completely just allow anyone with no creativity to just start making music.
But it goes back to how does the cream of the crop
Stand out?
No, I'll even use the term isolate itself.
Branding.
But the term we have to really let people understand is isolate themselves. Because like we used to, and we talked about it last time, and the one just really quickly, what we talked about is the difference between, we live in a world where everything's on demand subscriptions, so it's everyone's pulled together, so everyone is competing with everybody. Where we used to be transactional, so it didn't matter if you were the most niche, crazy little shithole band in the basement and you only had 100 people that attended and they bought something each. You could go month to month, and like the industry needs to go back to transactional means to survive, which going back to everything that you've worked on and done in the past, right? And everything we're talking about, it's critical for those artists that you described to isolate themselves from the minutiae of the Walmarts of music. Like Walmart should exist. Cool, I'll get fucking cheap cereal.
Yeah.
Awesome. But like you still need the mom and pops. You still need even the more like, you're only invited to that
100%.
jazz show or the whatever underground show or whatever.
Record store. Like I love going like Rough Trade, you know, or like I'll go to Rough Trade like in New York. I'll go to Rough Trade in London. Like last month, like I just went to a show, like one of my favorite bands called the Blood Brothers. And if you're like a certain type of rock fan, like they are a cult icon, right? And it's one of those cases that, you know, there's people like crowd surfing. It's like the dads and the skinny jeans and like, you know, the kids who like figured out about their music in the last 10 years. And it was like, it's a real thing. You know, some people think of like, oh, okay, I know about emo. No, this is like the real deal. And it's like church when you're in these rooms and in these spaces, right? And I don't care if there's a single metric that says they are popular. It's a fact. And as someone from like a curation taste background, that's the truth that I live in. Where it's kind of like, no, this is just a cultural truth. I don't care. Maybe they were probably in the cover of like NME magazine or something. I don't really care.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
And if you don't know anyone else you can agree, then you're not friends with people who are in these spaces.
What does that mean, cultural truth? If you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think a cultural truth means it's kind of like some things I think define an era. It's what's what's CBGBs is. It's what SOBs is right now. It's before I moved to New York City, I was like, oh, I want to go to what is it, 285 Kent and Kinfolk and like these places. Like, if you go to these places, who's there? Me going to this venue that was called China Chalet, and me first hearing what's his name, Sheck West first played, and the room erupted, and I'm like, what is this song? I didn't even know this. Everyone in this room knows it. Let me pull my Shazam and put it, and like it wasn't a thing yet. But like if I'm in this room and it's 20 people jumping around with the DJ, these 20 people matter to me. And I feel like
100%.
to me that's what a cultural truth is. And once again, it could be someone can live in like West Virginia. If that's hot in West Virginia, shout out to you. That's the cultural truth of West Virginia. Might not resonate with me in New York.
Right.
Yeah. There's hipsters in Bushwick. This cultural truth is there. Now that simply is gonna probably like influence like a Charlie XCX and then influenced by like a something else one day. But I think that often when we talk about these tech platforms to make it relevant, I think we gotta kind of have kind of this still in the back of your mind, like, is there any way that someone is trying to create a movement, try to define their voice, like trying to, take all these influences they've always had, but they've never been able to channel it? Can your tools actually do that? And if not, it's not always about being first, it's about who's best. So if it's not that, your platform, maybe someone else will figure out how to do it better.
Man, and with that, this is the Work Podcast.
We're supposed to say this like at the same time, like it's like, and that's the work. So it's like 1, 2, 3.
And that's the work.